Hello, my loves. Today we're going to look at some more Reddit stories, and if you've enjoyed a Reddit story, why don't you consider hitting the subscribe button? Maybe that's the notification bell too, and let's start with today's story. I finally went no contact for the last time and it feels like freedom, I hope. Growing up, my sister, my mom, my stepdad, and myself moved to a different state, and my dad followed us there. Almost a year and my dad sabotaged this own job and left back to the original state. Since then we barely saw him, yet to this day he keeps telling everyone he went down to the second state to see myself and my sister all the time. He did not yet when I told him he didn't, I'm wrong, and then when I gave examples, I'm still wrong, but he has this victim mentality that's beyond insane. He also, when I was I think 13 years old, my mom's father died suddenly and we went back to original state for a few days. My father called my mother and stated that if she didn't let my father see myself and my sister he would disown us. My mother was on the verge of a mental breakdown about my grandfather, and she had made it clear why we were in original state. He threatened to disown myself and my sister, while my mom is two other times kind of similar to this. So he is a straight up narcissist. You talk to him for 5 minutes and get the gist kind of guy. My family has done so many things, I'm seriously thinking of writing a book. Anyway, one day I was at a restaurant and my father called me and asked if I could watch the dogs for a few days while he was away. I said no, and he started screaming at me while my stepmother sat there and let him, and even added in there, "Well, you stayed at your aunt's house for 2 weeks. I told her, as I just said when I said no, it's because you have 3 dogs that you barely clean up after, and it smells so bad of dog, and I am allergic to them. Literally, after 30 minutes my throat swells, my eyes water, and I'm so itchy." My father says that's because of mold and not the 30 to 50 pounds dogs trying to get my attention. Don't get me wrong, I love dogs, I take allergy meds, but even those have a limit. I told my father no, and again, I'm wrong about my own body and allergies. He knows all. So, after he screamed at me on the phone where other people in the restaurant were staring, the next day I had to get ready for my first ever plane ride, and he and my stepmom knew I was nervous. I got to the airport, sent a text, nothing. Got on the plane, sent a text, nothing. My aunt sends a text to my stepmom and dad, response. These people are f***ing 58 and 55 years old. Giving me the silent treatment. My aunt and I got into the chauffeur car and I saw my aunt texting my stepmom asking why aren't they responding. My stepmother says, she's being a brat, instead of saying what you guys are doing is not okay. My aunt says, oh, she's young. My father then over the week vacation calls and texts my aunt but won't answer me at all. I was like, okay. So I took them off Facebook. You don't know when someone removes you as a friend. They found out within an hour and texted me saying, I don't know what your problem is, paragraph. I blocked both. Then 2 years later my aunt convinced me to talk to him again, and I was like, ig. She pushed and I'm like, okay, I did, and I regretted it. Immediate guilt trip. I texted you on your birthday, and then when I told him multiple times this is going to take a while for me. I was clear about my pace and boundaries so many times, and then he pushed saying I hurt my stepmother's feelings too, when I blocked them. No apology to me, nothing. As I'm typing this, I'm remembering the time 4 years ago my stepmother needed to get something done at the hospital, minor procedure, and I was volunteered to take her, and a few days at least before I said no, my father called me while I was sitting at my uncle's watching TV and started screaming about how he had to wind up taking my stepmother to the hospital because I bailed, all that lovely stuff, and how he had to take time off work, yet literally 2 weeks prior he took off a week from work to go to another state. His boss was a total pushover, it was ridiculous. This was only a day thing, too, knit, even 3 hours. I never got an apology for that. Sidetrack, sorry. Anyway, so this time my father tries to push me to talk to my stepmother. Of course I did. Of course my stepmother sounded so hurt. No apology from her either. This was a few months ago. So I'm having financial issues and trying to find a job, so my father and stepmother I guess talked and said they would help me with money because they helped her kids and my sister. Not because I'm his daughter. Everything to him is a business transaction, not just because. It's hard to explain. I has given them my time, effort. Say I don't have any friends because I was so mentally conditioned to what they wanted. I'm in therapy, imagine how I felt realizing that. I don't just mean money either, everything. He acts like everything is a favor and you owe him. I let him make me feel for years I owed him my life. I didn't choose to be born. So then any time he called me within the past couple months, when he would call I never got how are you? Are you okay? He only called me to talk about himself, because he was bored and or something happened and he was moody. Example, he called me last Monday and started saying my realtor is a blah 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 and I'm so done with your aunt over something stupid. He yelled at a guy and my aunt said they was not a way to go about it and my father decided she was wrong and is now telling everyone she's crazy. Not once did he even ask about me or my life. When he does, more rare than a blue moon and it'd only to tell everyone. He's a king gossip like you wouldn't believe. He never asked how I was doing. I had to interrupt him and tell him or blatantly state it. I got my tonsils out in 2021 and I MWPT trying to tell my father the doctor said someone needed to look after me for 10 days. He kept saying we'll talk about it later then freaked when the doctor called after my appointment and told him. Then 10 days later thankfully did good my stepmother got full-blown COVID and it got to my father. Now it's still only been 10 days and it still feels like I can talk but not much, very sore and still on super pain meds. My father called me and asked him to drive to get him meds and take them to him and food. I was post-op from a tonsillectomy and the doctor told him about not getting sick, care instructions, everything. Damn good doctor honestly, worst part was just a chipped tooth. During healing my father also kept saying how he had a hernia surgery and was up and about 2 days later. Literally anything that happened to me, he had it worse from his mentality. My stepmother had 2 hernias in her stomach and my father brought up HPW. He was good after 2 days. It's like he's on this pedestal and yet has it worse than everyone. The worst part of all of this? Their mentality. The worst part of their mentality that I'm beyond over? Name will do it. In not saying my name because they may find this. I will drop everything and do whatever they wanted, whenever. What really sliced the scandal was a few days ago my stepmother texted me. She never texts, calls first. Ever, it's always you have to contact her and my father got angry at me in high school. I didn't text her, but she never texted me so my dad screamed at me and I said okay, I will take responsibility, but she hasn't said anything either. Why is this only on me? I was 16 and it was after the first summer I saw her and said they sold their house. I was like okay cool. She said they got less than what they wanted so I asked how much? She tells me then right after asks so I heard you're getting unemployment? I said yeah well that's something for money and nothing else. She never reaches out first. Ever. I'm saying that because if she really cared why did she tell me about getting money but then asking about unemployment and nothing else? Granted she could have waited on me to say something but the feeling of follow-up for asking for money still felt like a trap. I can't explain why. It's hard saying all of this because you guys don't know them so it can sound normal but there's always a motive with these two. My stepmother would always throw me under the bus too. Even over something stupid like a holistic fair, she told my father I wanted to go. I went to their house and was in the kitchen and my father blatantly asks so why do you want to go to this thing? I told him well stepmom said she wanted to go and asked me to go with her then my father said she told me you wanted to go? I then asked if he wanted hearing aids because I just said the opposite. Granted it was like he didn't believe me. Yes this was small but I mean even something as small as that. It wasn't a big deal thing but it got to bigger stuff. I told my father something serious a month ago and said please don't tell anyone, not even stepmother. A week later she called me and was telling me a piece of what I said to my father. This is the icing of almost 27 years of abuse. I promise it's not just a petty thing. I cut them off after my therapy appointment because talking about them made me feel miserable. I felt so back and forth because they're my parents and you hold out hope for change. It's been 2.5 years and the only change was me. I'm proud of myself. I'm proud this time I've smelled the bullcrap before it came. That was also the problem. You shouldn't have to. I may feel emotional later, but right now I actually feel content. I made the right choice, and this time there's no going back. There wasn't a big fight to initiate it, so a lot of heat will be on me, but they're the only ones gonna talk me. Who cares? I can finally make friends and move on with my life. Until I talked to them again in January, I never realized how bad our relationship was. I was always white on I have friends. Then it hit me, you're the go-to girl for two people who treat you like garbage and expect a diamond. Oh, one more story. So my father needed something. He asked my sister's husband for help. Husband gave father friend's phone number to help out with something. My father didn't like the job that was done, so he called and left a voicemail for the guy. The guy husband's friend came over banging on my father's door with my father's money in hand, wanting to give it back. Now my father just said he left a voicemail. He never stated what he left in that voicemail. When I kept asking what did you say and how did you say it, would not answer me. He kept saying how the guy was on drugs and crazy and a hack, yada yada. Something else happened between my father and my sister's husband, so my father said the husband isn't welcome, but my sister is. My sister hasn't been over since my father gave that ultimatum of me or your husband, and it was a few weeks later. My father was still waiting for my sister to come over. He was still waiting for her to pick him over her own husband. My father and stepmother would get mad because my sister integrated into her husband's family. She has no family, so she integrated with the husband's. Makes sense. I mean, he got mad at my sister and just starts bad-mouthing. He called his own grandchildren feral. My father and stepmother would complain about not being invited to stuff, and I kept saying father left, stepdad died, I left, my mother is doing whatever, she rightfully wants nothing to do with you. I would do the same thing too. My sister never wanted my dad around and made that extremely clear. He doesn't get my sister and I want nothing to do with him. My father always used our boyfriends too, until they're useless to him, and it would strain our relationships. I can only imagine how bad it was for my sister with her husband after my father showed up and tried to play dominance. That was the final straw, funnily enough. I saw my sister's situation and thought, if it were me, if it were my husband and father, I would have strained my relationship with my husband and still tried to be nice of my father's feelings, while my father never thinks of mine. He never does. He never will. If anyone is iffy about cutting contact like I did, King do it. I want real friends, I want real love, I want my own life. I finally took it back, and there was no blowout needed. I blocked them, and I don't owe them an explanation, because no matter what, after every fight, because my father did something and I was rightfully upset, he would say, what your problem is. I realized too a year ago, in every single one of my father's stories about a situation that escalated, he was always the victim. I would hear from the other side, then it made so much more sense. I've seen it too. Then later, when my father was on the phone telling one of his friends his version, I said that didn't happen, you did this and that, to where it escalated. Then he told me to shut the F up and mind my own business. Example, freeway was half closed, sign said do 60, guy ahead of him was doing 60, I was passenger, my father rode the tail end of the guy, and then when it got back to 2 lanes rolled his window down and yelled at the guy, then cut him off, like his tail end almost hit the front guy's end. Then my father said that guy was senile. He would tell everyone the guy was going deliberately slow, then when it cleared would still sta in front of my father, and the guy would flip my father off and try to stay ahead so my father couldn't pass. That's one instance without getting too detailed. That was the thing though, it was always everyone else's fault. He would kick you in the knee, and when you get upset he'd say you're the jerk for no reason. I found out all my father was saying about me to a lot of people, and it wasn't true, but people would believe it until they met me and act so confused. They then told me what my father said about me. It hurt. A lot. Not anymore. For anyone who reads this long a story, thanks for getting to the end. I needed to vent, but I also wanted people who feel similar to know too they aren't crazy. I would search for some similarities, but didn't find much. Story, whipped up for thinking to leave my husband. We've been together for over a decade and married for 8 years. We have 2 small kids and even moved across countries. Both of us work full-time in office jobs. I don't have a concrete reason to justify leaving him without questions, but I also don't have a compelling reason to stay. I'm at a crossroads and unsure what to do. He works, helps with the kids when asked, and occasionally helps around the house. We don't fight, but we also don't really do much together. I manage the house, plan vacations, handle all the bureaucracy of adult life, do the shopping, and manage the kids' appointments and extras. He does put them to bed and look after them if I go out, but I'm in charge of almost everything else by default. His sole responsibility is the car, as I don't drive. And he just does not keep it clean and washed. I've been diagnosed with burnout and am going through a personal crisis. Despite this, he hasn't changed anything to help me out. He doesn't make plans, and weekends just pass by. Any activities or plans are initiated by me. Even his gifts have become lackluster, with no effort put into the one thing I refuse to do for him. If we go on a date, it's just dinner and back home. Our sex life is down to maybe twice a month, even though the kids sleep well. In his personal life, he's become indifferent for years now, not going out with friends or engaging in activities. He just sits on the sofa watching TV or on his phone. With the kids, he's okay but lacks patience and snaps frequently. We've discussed therapy for him, but he doesn't care for it. He's not against it but not motivated either. He gets cranky and overwhelmed easily. I care for him, and nothing is outright terrible, but I'm tired. Tired of him not caring, tired of him always being stressed about his minimal responsibilities, and tired of taking care of everything. The worst part. He drags me down with him. If I don't want to do anything, he won't judge, which makes it a slippery slope for me. I'm unsure about the impact of a divorce. Would it be better for me and the kids? Is this feeling of I'll be better without him just a phase? I feel like we're together out of comfort and routine, and because we have kids. Am I the asshole for thinking about divorce? What should I do? Story: partner's relationship with my parents. My partner and I have been together for 6 years. Something traumatic happened to us 3 years in when our relationship was rocky and we went to stay with my parents. My partner is from a really different background from mine and feels I lied to them about where I was from. This background clashes with their values. After a lot of talking, my partner doesn't want anything to do with my family. I don't agree with the way they view my family, but my partner thinks because I have been brought up with them, I don't see it. They feel extremely strongly about this, to the point they say it has ruined their view of the world to have seen them. I don't want to go into too much detail, as I'm worried they may see this, but there was no abuse from my parents. They are very loving, kind, generous, and accepting queer people who genuinely want the best for everyone they meet. The rockiness in our relationship came from bad communication and my passive-aggressive behavior. They say they are okay with me having a relationship with my parents, but they absolutely do not want to be part of their lives. I respect that, and although it has been difficult and I can't say I have always been understanding, I feel I am okay with that aspect of things now. They had a lot of stress in their life and had a low mood from this. Because of their mental state at the time, I said I agreed with them about how they felt about my parents. I really know this wasn't the right thing to do, but I didn't know what to do. They were suicidal and would not speak to anyone, including their friends, a counselor, a priest, or an anonymous helpline. I felt stuck and I know it wasn't right. Now they are doing much better. I have kept in touch with my parents through text, but they think we broke up and that I am just living on my own, getting on with things. My partner wants a future together, and really, despite the shitty things before, it is everything that I thought I wanted. The problem I have now is that I genuinely don't know how our situation is going to work long term. I think in the heat of it all, I thought I could just keep these parts of my life separate, and I was happy to accept that. I feel sad that I don't see my family as much, and when I said I wanted to see my mom, my partner was so distressed by it that they said they would go to a hotel to stay because they didn't know how they were going to face me when I came back. They also wanted us to spend Christmas apart and alone because I would likely be phoning them. I should add that it isn't just a problem with my family, as they are fine with other members and actually really like them. It is my parents specifically. Things at the moment between us are far better, and they seem to be in a much better place mentally, and some of the previous stressful situations have improved. However, I feel like I am going to ruin things by bringing this topic up. Also, I have done the wrong thing because I have, in a way, enabled them to think that way about my family, who love me very much. I feel like a terrible daughter, and if anything, the whole situation has made me feel a stronger love for my parents, and I feel even more in disagreement with how my partner feels. I know this sounds crazy, and to be honest, it has been awful, but I genuinely didn't know what to do. I really felt like they were going to do something serious. I know the answer to this is communication with them and not the internet, but I guess I just want some advice or opinions on how you navigate a relationship when your partner doesn't want to be part of your family. I want to know how I can make this work long term if I can, and how I can make both of our wishes and values be protected. I absolutely do not want my partner to go against their values for me. I also feel terrible for my parents, and although they don't ask too many questions at the moment because they think I'm busy with my career in another part of the country, I really don't know how I am going to do this long term. I feel completely stuck and like I am being made to choose between people who I love. My partner has no family and no one else, and to leave them would be really, and literally, leaving them alone in the world, and I just can't do that either. Story: AITA for ending my 10-year friendship. I am 21 years old, have just moved into an apartment with 21 years old my boyfriend and 21 years old friend. Now, my friend probably lasted about 2 days living here if I am being honest before she took off to her parents' house saying that she was homesick. I totally understood that and said it was okay, but for her to keep us updated on her situation because all three of us had a responsibility to the apartment. A week goes by and no word from her, so I text her again asking what was going on. She says that she is going back, which she does, but only for another day. After coming back she slept here, but the next day took off again. This keeps going for the whole month of June. I don't see her and I give her space so that she can relax. By the month of July, she says that she has to talk to us and that it is important. We schedule a day for her to come over and talk with us. She bails last minute and says she can't make it because she doesn't have the money for an Uber. Now we finally are able to talk over the phone, and she tells us that she is not going to attend university and that she is not coming back to the apartment. She says that she missed her friends from work and her family. I totally understand the family part. My dad is in jail as of recently and I lost 3 family members that I have been able to grieve properly because they are in another country, but at the same time, they are a 30-minute drive away. Now I live in a big state, so those drives are basically going down the road. The next week, we were confronted by her sister. Insults were thrown around all while Jane did not say a word for her case. We were accused of kicking her out, which we did not do. We have the messages and audio evidence of her saying she is willingly moving out. We were accused of saying insults and making her miserable, but the funniest thing is that all of this was coming out of her sister and not Jane. We had a second meeting at her house, which is where we came to an agreement. But not before her mother blamed me for making her move out. I did not force her to make this decision and I constantly reminded her that she could say no if she wasn't ready, which she said she was ready to move out. It also earned a remark from her mom saying that because she was the baby of the family it was my fault for making her do this. Keep in mind we are all turning 22 this year. So yes, I am angry that she said nothing between the interactions we had with our families. I am angry that she watched as her family called me a bad friend, a toxic friend, being insulted by her sister as she stood behind her not even meeting my eyes, calling me a liar and saying I kicked her out, and taking no responsibility for the legal contract that she willingly signed. Story: I don't want to be here anymore. Long story. There's just too much pain for me to handle. I feel I either die or go insane. There have been good moments in my life, but am constantly reliving the bad. It started off when I was living in Georgia. My mom had got on drugs really bad when I was 4 years old and my sister was 6. Remember her and my dad always arguing BC of it, waking up to mom holding a knife towards dad and then screaming at each other. Tea was every day and every night. Along with living in a bad environment, constantly getting robbed, my parents allowed a homeless guy to live with us for a while and he would lock me and my sister in a room and beat us and cover my mouth. Just a lot of bad shit. Until one night my dad had enough and I remember vividly him laying with me and my sister and telling us we were leaving in the morning to Kentucky to live with my grandparents. So the next morning we woke up, threw a bunch of shit in the car and left my mom, then remember her chasing behind us and screaming not to leave. But my dad thought that would be the best thing to do for our lives. So we made it to KY and I met my grandparents. My grandpa was my dad and uncle's stepdad and my mama was their real mom. When we first got there it took a long time to warm up. My grandpa and grandma had to drag me and my sister out of the corner and I remember just screaming I hate you and I want to kill you and I didn't even know them that so grandpa made me pick a switch. They were very strict. Eventually we warmed up to them and settled in. Dad stayed with us there. Not long after being there my dad had decided to take me and my sister to his friends down the road and they were all drinking and playing guitar. Having a good time. Till we all eventually headed outside on the porch and in the yard. Me and my sister stayed on the porch and was hitting a punching bag. And this is where the trauma in my life got worse. Nathan. My dad's friend was very drunk and I remember him walking outside with his eyes closed with a shotgun barrel to his head. Face towards me and my sister. And boom. I remember it all. My dad tried to calm us down and say that he accidentally shot himself in the leg. But that wasn't true. He had killed himself right in front of us. A couple months pass since that and my mom starts calling my dad saying she's off of everything and she's doing better. So my dad tells me and my sister he is gonna be gone for a couple of days to pick mom up. I remember hugging him bawling my eyes out saying please don't leave, but he had to, but then a couple days go by and he's not back. Papa and Mama say he's spending time with our mom for a while. We were extremely sad but figured we would see him again. But no. December 13, 2009. My dad had picked my mom up and on the way back got into a fatal crash and died. My mom survived. The time we thought he was staying with mom in Georgia he was actually in a coma for 6 months, the day my grandpa told me he had picked me up from daycare and my sister from school. He said there was good news and bad news. He told us to choose one or the other. We both chose good news. He said our mom is back. But wouldn't tell us the bad news until we got home. Where my family was in the living room crying because they found out about him dying and so did we. My mother had to pull me away from the casket. She stayed for a week after the funeral. Then one morning me and Sissy woke up and she wasn't here. She had abandoned us without even saying goodbye. So now my mom is back in Georgia. On drugs even worse and me and my sister are living with my grandparents. Fast forward 3 years. I'm around 8 years old my sister is 10-11, have already been through hell, but that wasn't all. Remember I was taking a shower cleaning myself. And when I get out I hear the door sling open. It's my grandpa. I grab a towel and try to cover my body and he's just pulling it out of my hands trying to reveal me. He had a camera. He took multiple pictures of me naked and scared. And I'd rather not know what happened with them. He also molested my sister in many different ways. We didn't realize what he had done until we got older. I was 13 and my sister brought up something he had done and it made me realize what he did to me. So we both decided to tell my uncle. My uncle told us not to confront him or anything and seemed like he believed us. The next day at school I told my cousin Audrey about it and she started bawling her eyes out and it had gotten around to the office. Eventually I'm called to the office and one of my aunts are there to pick me up. She looks angry. As soon as I get in the car she asked me very irritated what have you and Emma been making up about my dad? We were in middle school and she instantly shut us down. My grandpa called us crazy. The family believed it and sent my sister off to an institution, and when she got back my grandpa had molested her again, and I backed down completely and said it was all a lie on my part because I thought they wouldn't love me anymore and I wouldn't have a family, and why grandma had cancer during this time and died in 2013. The whole thing had blown over not long after, and we were pretty much silenced. My sister came back eventually, but always snuck out and tried to find ways to not be there. So it was me, my sister, and Papa. Until my sister was 18, then she was out of there. So it was just me and my grandpa, and my mind had completely tuned out everything, I guess for the best, to keep my sanity and not kill him. Stayed with him as his health got worse and he had gotten dementia and his liver was failing. He started forgetting everything and defecating in the floors, and I had to keep a baby monitor beside him in his room and one in mine. My aunts would sometimes come check on him and ask me how he was doing, and they had me take care of him and clean him up and everything. He eventually got to the point he was stuck in a hospital bed in the living room, right where my grandma passed. His days did not go on much longer, and I got on pills in this part of my life, so it was all just a bad time. He died not long after. So I moved into my aunt and uncle's, but ran away and stayed at a friend's the majority of the time. Sissy had her own place now and gave birth to my nephew a couple years later. I was 17 ATM. My mind was and is now in a darker place. I don't talk to any of my aunts and uncles anymore because of our past. I am now 20, and 4 months ago my biggest nightmare became a reality. March 25th, my sister is struck by a truck right down the road from her house and died from the impact. She was texting me 3 days before on how she doesn't want to be here anymore. And it was just a couple weeks after she had my other nephew. She was 22 years old and suffered most of those years from the things we witnessed together. My best friend and only person who could completely understand me. She got hit in the middle of the day, and it hasn't been announced if it was an accident or not yet. The people left are the ones who silenced us and our mom who abandoned us. Which I just recently moved her down here because she doesn't have a car and she's addicted pretty bad. It sucks that after all these years she can be here after my sister dies, but I'm still the one that had to bring her here or it wouldn't have happened. I have chosen to forgive her even though it's hard. But everyone in my blood seems to get taken away tragically. My full-blood aunt was also hit by a car in Georgia, and I fear death is coming after me next. So while I'm here, I want to be the bigger person before I go. I think of suicide a lot and it has gotten worse. But I am getting into psychiatric care here soon and I hope that might help. Either way, I'm going insane and wish that me and my sister could have at least had a chance and wasn't mentally messed up from the start. I'm trying not to bring destruction all around me from being so broken. I know it's a lot to read, but I wanted to be heard from somewhere. If anybody has any advice for me, please let me know. Story, Wibda, if I tell my friend's boyfriend she cheated on him. My boyfriend, 28 years old, and I am 28 years old, have been together for 4 years. We've had our ups and downs, and there is way more than I could get into about some highly upsetting and unhealthy things that have happened. I've chosen to get over them, but I'm starting to question myself and the relationship over something that happened last night. I have a reminder on my phone that goes off silently every hour, 1-minute dance party, and I use it during the day when I'm working to remind me to get up and stand. I've had this for about 2.5 years. My boyfriend defensively asked me a month ago who was texting me in the middle of the night. I got confused and asked him what he meant, and he said he heard my phone vibrate. I explained to him that I have my reminder, which we've talked about in the past, and also that we have a security camera that gives me notifications. I showed him my phone and he said he understood. I didn't like the tone and the lack of confidence he showed towards me, but I decided it was fair enough for him to ask. We've also talked openly that we don't care whether the other looks at their phone, never happens, but we know that it's fine. I truly don't care because I have nothing to hide. I woke up in the middle of the night last night to him demanding to know who I was texting. I was so confused and saw that I was leaning over my phone on the side table. I think I was turning my phone over in my sleep because my notification went off for our security camera and the phone was lighting up the room. I'm not sure because it all feels like a dream, but he was angry and demanded to know who I was texting. I stated I didn't know because in that moment I wasn't sure what was going on. He demanded my phone and I handed it over and he scrolled for a while, then gave it back. I put it on my charger and fell immediately back to sleep. It all felt like a dream and I thought it was until I woke up this morning and really thought about it. I've explained to him why my phone will sometimes light up in the night, doesn't vibrate for security camera, light one time, vibrate for reminder. He knows. I should turn it over before I fall asleep, but that's my own forgetfulness. I feel like his lack of trust in me is complete unfair as I have never given him a reason to doubt me, ever. I don't have any male friends as I haven't spoken to any of them since college. I work from home so I have no coworkers I'm interacting with during the week. I hardly ever leave the house. He uses my car and is gone a lot and I am always here. We have security cameras which he has access to so he literally could see if I left and when, but that never happens because I'm home 95% of the time and if I'm out of the house I'm usually with him. So I feel like it's unfair and insulting for him to even have a sliver of doubt towards me. I have very truthfully spoken to him how I feel about cheating. It's a non-option and I would never. I've also told him that cheating is completely unacceptable to me, and if he ever did then it would be over. There would be no discussion. I thought he actually heard me when we had these discussions. I, Nick, 20 years old, found out my friend, Grace, 19 years old, is cheating on her current boyfriend, Michael, 19 years old. I told her I would tell him what she was doing and give him proof, screenshots of conversations. My friend is actually also my ex-girlfriend. We dated over a year ago and separated because I myself had found out she cheated on me during the relationship. She had moved back to the town I live in January of this year and was not dating anyone that I was aware of since I asked multiple times and was told she was single. Me and her started a friends with benefits situation that only lasted until the first week of April. I knew she would be talking to others and she knew the same about me. Where the issue comes into play is that in the last week she has told me she has a boyfriend and has been dating him for quite some time. When I tried to get clarity about the timeline, she would not give me one. I only wanted to make sure that I wasn't a part of an affair on her side of their relationship. I wanted to believe she would not do that again because the way everything blew up in the past with her cheating on me, she lost quite a few of her close friends as well as our mutual friends. I then got messages from a couple different people who either were her friends and knew the timeline of her new relationship or were guys she was also having friends with benefits situations with. It turns out she started to date her boyfriend the beginning of March but continued to do all the things with me and two other guys. I confronted her 2 days ago and told her I knew, and that I thought she had grown up and realized that cheating on a partner doesn't get you anywhere in life. I did ask for her side of the story and asked her why she wouldn't tell me or these other guys that she got a boyfriend because I know, at least for myself, I would have cut off our arrangement. She then went on a tangent about how much she regrets it and she knew it was wrong but didn't want to give me up. Also stating she didn't know if she really wanted to be with him and wanted to see if there was anything between her and one of us other 3 guys. When she was done explaining herself to me, I told her what she did was wrong. Even though she ended the FWB situation with me almost a month ago and we are just friends, she continued the other 2. She tried pleading with me after I said she was wrong in her actions. I told her I was going to make her boyfriend aware of what she did, and made sure she heard from my mouth that I was not doing it out of jealousy. I was doing out of respect for the guy she is dating. Now to yesterday when I was planning on sending the message to her boyfriend about her infidelity. She sent me a text in the morning begging one more time that I don't tell him anything, and I obviously told her no and that I will be telling him. She then sent a message that if I told him, she would be kicked out of where she's living, his mother's house, and would have nowhere to go since her own mom kicked her out. While I feel horrible for her living situation, part of me still wants to tell him, but I also don't want her to be homeless and on the streets. I cannot let her stay with me because of 2 reasons. The house I live in is not mine, it is my grandparents' and I live with them. I don't think it would be appropriate. So with all that said, Wibda, if I told her boyfriend she is cheating. Story, AITA for not supporting my DF and his coach. I hate 20-year-old, just got into a heated argument with my median distance boyfriend, let's call him Doug, 20-year-old. Doug and I met at school where we both participate in the same sport, cross country. Doug is from a smaller town and has limited options for coaching but grew up working with Liam, 34M. Liam has always been great with Doug and Doug credits him for all of his success. This past fall, right before Doug and I started dating, Doug invited me to travel to a big cross-country race about 45 minutes away to meet Liam. I was excited. I really liked Doug and this seemed like a fun trip. The whole short trip was really fun and I truly enjoyed getting to meet Liam. Flash forward to the spring and Doug and I have been dating for 5 months and are happy. Liam attends one of Doug's races and meets my immediate family and we all hang out with Doug's family. Everyone loves Liam. When school ended for summer, Doug and I went back to our hometowns, around a 4-hour drive. We both helped coach younger athletes in our respective towns and hung out on weekends. I was talking with my boss and high school coach about Doug and I happened to mention Liam and how Doug was still being coached by him even after high school. My coach's face drained of all color and he said I should Google Liam. I was very confused but did so. Turns out Liam had been charged with 3 counts of battery against children and 1 count of child porn. He had not yet been convicted. When I spoke with Doug that night, I expressed how I was a bit upset that I had not been informed of the charges. Doug immediately went on the defensive and kept going on and on about how he didn't support Liam's possible actions but only wanted to support Liam's family, a wife and 6 kids. And honestly all he talked to Liam about was cross-country, so none of it affected that. I told Doug he could do whatever he wanted but that I would never financially support someone with those charges against them. Doug started crying and hit a wall multiple times. He has been known to do this a couple of times in the past and I have always told him how much I hated it. I ended up hanging up the phone and told him to call me back when he was done hitting things. 5 minutes later, he called me back with his mom who kept telling me I have no right to feel upset because Liam was not yet convicted and her children are not gossips. Doug just cried. I explained to her that I felt I should have been told before I traveled with Doug to meet him and introduced him to my family. She said her family had a discussion 2 years ago when charges first started popping up and they had decided they would do nothing unless Liam was convicted. I asked her if her family was allowed to make that choice, shouldn't I be as well? She basically said no. Her family were not gossips and I was never left alone with Liam, so I was never in any danger. Eventually, she left and Doug and I argued more about how I wasn't supporting him in his decision to continue lessons until a conviction and now that Liam was going to jail, he had stopped lessons. Apparently, Liam was convicted a couple of days ago. But I was an a-hole because I was prejudiced against a man with bad charges filed against him and that I need to be more supportive. AITA Story, AITA for breaking up with my boyfriend because of his daughter. Wanting to break up with my boyfriend because his daughter is a nightmare. So I am 34 years old, have been dating 33 years old my boyfriend for a year. Let me start by saying my boyfriend is amazing. He's loving, affectionate, kind, and compassionate, basically everything you'd want in a man. But things haven't been so pleasant lately. My boyfriend and has a 4-year-old daughter that makes our relationship very difficult. He now has full custody because her mom didn't want to be a parent anymore, so she just pays child support. His daughter is a piece of work and that's me being nice. She very rude when she walks into a room and everyone speaks to her. She says nothing like she owns the place. She is the most selfish child ever, where she would share nothing of hers but would expect everyone to share with her. If no one shared with her, my God, the tantrum she would throw is ridiculous. She would scream and cry at the top of her lungs and it would get so bad that she would hit herself or make herself sick. I have 3 children from with my ex-husband, 14 years old, 10 years old, 3-year-old. And to say my children dislikes her is an understatement. My 3-year-old always shares with his daughter, but one day I got my daughter a very cute American Girl doll and his daughter wanted to play with it, and when my daughter said no, she snatched it from my daughter so hard that she fell. So my daughter got up, smacked the ish out of her and took her doll back. Let's just say that caused an argument between me and my boyfriend. He felt like my daughter should apologize, and I told him he's fucking crazy if he thought my daughter should apologize for defending herself against his demon of a child. He never sees anything wrong with her actions. He thinks it's perfectly acceptable behavior for a 4-year-old. One time I cooked dinner. It was fried chicken, wild rice, and green beans. Nothing special. She threw an almighty tantrum, said she wasn't eating it, and threw the entire plate on the floor. He cleaned it up, told her it was going to be okay, and took her to get a Happy Meal just to stop the tantrum. My breaking point was 2 weeks ago when we took the kids to Great Wolf Lodge for the weekend, seeing how we only lived about an hour away from there. Things started out okay until we took the kids to the pool. My 10-year-old son has Down syndrome and he doesn't know how to swim, so he stays off to the side and does his own thing. His daughter was running around the pool and proceeded to jump on my son's back so hard he fell in the pool and started to struggle to stay afloat. My 14-year-old son and a lifeguard had to save my son. She was okay because she was wearing a life vest. She thought my son drowning was hilarious. So I grabbed my kids, went to our room, packed our things, and left him and his daughter there. Once we got home, we packed our things and we are currently staying with my parents. He's been blowing up my phone, leaving voicemails and sending texts. I sent him one text saying I needed space. He then said I'm an asshole for potentially ending our relationship over an accident. Am I the asshole? Story: AITA for making my fiancé and I move away from his parents. I am 18 years old and recently moved up north to live full-time with my then long-distance 20-year-old boyfriend. Shortly after I moved up, he proposed. His parents offered us the opportunity to live with them while we plan the wedding and become more financially stable. We decided to accept their offer because apartment prices are insane right now, but we have to follow their strict rules for the time being. The most important one, and relevant to this story, is that we are not allowed to sleep in the same room or lie down next to each other under any circumstances. We decided to endure this for a few months because of the tough economy. Everything was going okay, but I always felt his parents were overbearing and very manipulative. They make promises to help us out of the kindness of their hearts, but there's always a catch. My fiancé's father, a retired cop and current lawyer who is also a hardcore Mormon, is a difficult person to be around. His mother means well but tries too hard to please her husband, which makes her manipulative and selfish as well. For the past few months, they have been trying to convince us to stay near them when we move out, even offering to buy us the house we want. I never thought this was a good idea because I know their intentions aren't genuine. Unfortunately, my fiancé is easily manipulated and believes everything his parents say. Now, here's where the drama started. 7 days ago, I had a bad gut feeling and decided to look through my fiancé's phone, which I had never done before. I found messages from an unsaved number, practically begging him to reply. These messages dated back about 2 months. Alarmed, I managed to find this person's full name, email, and address. It turned out to be his ex, whom I had repeatedly asked him to block because she's not a good person and has tried to convince him to leave me before. Their relationship was twisted and unhealthy. She cheated on him and manipulated him throughout. After a lot of questioning and investigating, I got the full story. My fiancé was cheating on me with her for the first 6 months of our relationship, and he continued communicating with her every few months up until May of this year. Thankfully, the flirting had stopped early on, but she continued to message him throughout our relationship. He only answered when she would ask about us. He claimed he did it to prove he was doing well without her. This was still unacceptable to me, especially since I had set clear boundaries about this person. After seeking advice from everyone I know and reading countless books on forgiveness and healing, I decided to give him another chance. You can criticize me and tell me to leave him, but when you're in my position, ending a relationship I've invested so much in isn't easy. We've both grown a lot since we first met, and I believe he has changed for the better. Moving on to what happened next, the night after I found out about all this, I was still shaken and asked my fiancé to stay in my room until I fell asleep because I didn't trust myself to be alone. I couldn't stop crying until around 1:20 a.m. and fell asleep 10 minutes later. At 1:45 a.m., I heard yelling and immediately woke up. It turned out my fiancé's dad had found him sitting in my room and assumed we were having intercourse, which he adamantly disallows. What scared me was how he began accusing my fiancé of being a pervert and shamed him for not being able to keep his penis away from me. This terrified me because we've never had intercourse in their house and have never given his father any reason to think otherwise. It made me think he had been fantasizing about catching us or something. After more yelling, we all went back to our rooms and went to sleep. The next day, when my fiancé returned from work, his mother asked if we had found an apartment yet. We hadn't, and when asked why she thought that, she said his father planned to give us a week to pack and leave. My fiancé was upset and unsure what to do, so I decided we should start packing. I called my mom, explained the situation, and she said she had a place for us to stay and would come to help us pack as soon as we were ready. With this support, I told my fiancé that if his parents threatened to kick us out, we would leave the state and live near my parents instead. Fortunately, he respects my decisions and immediately started helping me pack. His mom happened to walk past our room and saw us packing, so she asked where we planned to go. My fiancé told her that we were done with their toxic behaviors and we have decided to leave and break contact with them. She immediately started screaming and calling him vulgar names. I'm assuming she was just upset to hear that her son would be moving states away. She ended up leaving in tears. Later that night, his parents called us into the living room and announced they had changed their minds and wouldn't kick us out after all. Personally, I believe they only did this after realizing they would lose control over us, so I wasn't convinced. I told my fiancé we should still leave. He's understandably stressed and upset, but I'm struggling to heal after what he did to me. We need to work together to find a way forward, but I don't see how we can do that if his parents won't even allow us to hug. Story: AITA for cutting a girl out of my life for dating racists and homophobes and making me feel bad all the time. I'm half African but passing, so most people don't realize until I tell them. Which led to quite a few people starting to be racist towards me after being my friend for a while. One of which would make comments like calling me a monkey but then laughing about it and claiming it was just a joke when I would get annoyed. This girl, let's call her Amy, started dating that boy and would always complain to me about how racist he was when I would tell her about the things he would say, but also refused to break up with him. A few years later, she started dating this boy who would constantly make slave jokes. I should probably add he's white and would also make a lot of homophobic jokes. Amy is pansexual, so I never understood why she would want to date a guy like that, but she would get defensive when someone brought it up, so I chose to let her do her thing. After a while of this guy making dumb racially motivated jokes to me, a few sexist jokes, and just generally making me uncomfortable, I confronted Amy and she claimed she also hates when he does that, but again refused to break up with him. She would also make dumb comments about my weight even though she was always bigger than me, constantly gaslight me and other people in our friend group, not invite me places, and then claim she just didn't think I'd want to come, and make comments about how I could never get a boyfriend just because I chose to not date yet. One day after I found out she made plans with everyone and didn't invite me again, I'd had enough and decided to just block her on all social media, removed her number from my phone, and ignored her in public. She didn't deserve my time or an explanation. Recently I started talking to a guy I really liked and found out a couple days later that he was actually dating Amy the whole time and was only talking to me because she suggested it would be a funny joke. I think that just proves that she didn't deserve an explanation, but Story: am I the asshole for looking at my husband's messages? My husband, 39M, and I, 41F, have been married for 1.5 years, dated for 3.5, and have known each other for 6 years. We are a blended family and have both had relationships. Am I the asshole for looking at my husband's messages? My husband, 39-year-old, and I, 41-year-old, have been married for 1.5 years, dated for 3.5, and have known each other for 6 years. We are a blended family and have both had relationships in the past and dealt with toxicity and cheating. The first week we started dating, I laid out all my boundaries, with an exercise my therapist suggested that shows your wants/no-goes/places you'll compromise in a relationship. I told him about it and asked if he was interested in it, and he said yes, and we both learned quickly where our boundaries were. We continued to have good conversations about insecurities we were working on, reasons for some of our boundaries, etc. He still spoke to most of his exes, which I don't have an issue with in general. But I let him know I would not be okay with inappropriate conversations with exes like flirting, sexting, etc., or using them as an emotional support if we hit a rough patch. I also point blank asked him if he kept explicit pics of his exes and told him, while I don't judge those that do, with consent, or want to do that, I would not be okay with that in a relationship. He said he didn't, and we moved on. Some backstory. I dealt with a really toxic relationship about a year before I started dating my husband. This partner talked to lots of women and exes over social media and constantly lied about it. I only found out because the women reached out to me. I had never gone through an ex's phone or computer, etc. A few months into our relationship, I say relationship because we were both clear that we were in a monogamous relationship. We had done the casual thing before, and this wasn't that. He kept bringing up a female friend of his and what she was going through, but the way he brought her up felt off. I was honest about my feelings, but acknowledged that it could be my anxiety from previous relationships, and I never asked him to unfriend her or anything, just voiced my concern and why. His response was to ask if I wanted to see their messages. I said sure, and he hesitated but said he'd show me when we got back from vacation. He did, and I was super uncomfortable with how they spoke, and I told him so and why. Again, I never asked him to unfriend this person, but asked that he adjust how he interacted with her. After that, he would tell me if he changed his phone code and offer to let me look through it if I needed. I never really took him up on it until a similar thing happened with an ex. To be clear, he wasn't sexting or hooking up or asking for pics, it was flirtation. While some might be okay with that, I wasn't. So I addressed it again, and we went to couples therapy. I have looked a couple other times, but it was more to make myself realize he wasn't doing anything and this was just me. I never did any kind of deep dives, would just glance at a message thread or search history on social media, and that was it. And things were going okay. I felt we both loved each other and our hiccups were usually just from stressors in our life. I've told him I don't want to go through all his stuff as I felt it was unfair to his privacy and that I should work on my anxiety that led to that urge. He said he didn't mind and it wasn't an issue. I still backed off and just left things. For some reason I felt I needed to check, so I went on his account and scrolled to a name, not one I knew, just picked randomly, as I have in the past, and I clicked on it and ugh. The most recent stuff was flirtation like before, but the way they talked hinted at something previous. So I scrolled back. Apparently, this was someone he once dated. He said 10 years ago, but as recent as a few years ago, they were sending in pics, etc. A few months into us dating, on Valentine's Day, he was sending me cute messages and talking about a date night and romancing me. At the same time, he was telling her he'd smack her ass for Valentine's to make her feel better and would drive up to have sex if he didn't have to work. And then told her he'd be using her pics for self-pleasure that night and that those pics still had a hold on him. And he spoke to her in a way he's never spoken to me, in ways I've asked him to for years. I was gutted. Yes, this was a few years ago, but we were dating and I was clear about my boundaries and gave him plenty of outs. And it's not like I've gone through every conversation on his social media. He has hundreds and I've looked maybe 4 since we've been together, so I have no idea if this has happened more or more recent. I confronted him about it, but not out of anger. I started the conversation by apologizing for looking and then told him what I found and how it made me feel. At first, he acted like he had no idea who I was talking about and got his computer out. Then he started asking if we had been fighting and if he'd really said things to me the same day. He's reached out to women when we have rough patches before, but not like this, that I'm aware of. Then when he asked why I looked at her, I said I didn't know, because honestly I don't, I just picked one of the convos. And he acted like I was lying because he's told me stories about when they dated before and I obviously knew who she was, yet he had just acted like he didn't know who I meant. Anyway, it went downhill from there. He told me I'd just cause issues and if just hadn't looked we would be having any problems and I should know he's not the person he was then. And I guess part of me thinks he's right. It's his privacy. But he knows I'd rather be hurt with truth than lied to and I feel like an idiot. So, am I the asshole first looking? Bye and see you again in the next videos and stories.